can't comment on any specific drugs until the completion of the toxicology testing.
Welcome back to Hardball. With us now is Ed Gordon, who's interviewed Michael Jackson on a number of occasions, and Nancy O'Dell, of course, of Access Hollywood. Nancy, tell me what you know. I mean, I keep on my weekend show, I say, tell me something I don't know. There's a lot I don't know about this case. Michael Jackson, his condition in recent days, what's going on?
Well, I got to tell you, we did an exclusive interview today with a head hairstylist of the tour who has been with Michael every day since day one. And I got to tell you, the reports are really conflicting because there's been reports that he's been lethargic, showing up at rehearsals late. And that's absolutely, completely contradictory to what Clyde Haygood, who is the head hairstylist, told me. He said that he saw him on Tuesday and that he was on stage at rehearsals with 20-year-old dancers. And he was dancing like a 20-year-old, that there was no difference, and that it was the Michael Jackson that we know so well and love so well on stage, and that was who was performing, and that it was such a shame that, you know, we weren't going to be able to see him in this tour because the numbers that he was talking about and watching him perform, he said, was the Michael Jackson that we know and love on stage. And he said he was very, very involved in this whole process too, that, you know, he wasn't taking it lightly, that he was, you know, there and very into everything. He was, you know, designing all the wigs for all the dancers. He would have to go to Michael to get approval for every single hairstyle, that the ones he was doing for Thriller, Michael would go, oh, that looks fantastic. Hey, but I'd like to see some cobwebs in them. He even talked about how concerned Michael was for everybody else that was around him, that the crew was there, and that he was doing Smooth Criminal, the number, and he had this big machine gun that he would throw off to the crew member off stage, and he was so worried that the crew member didn't know he was going to throw this gun off. And he told him like 5 times, I just want to make sure that you know that, you know, I'm going to be throwing this off halfway through the number. I don't want it to hit you. And so he said he was just seemed to be very together with it. And on Tuesday, that he was in, you know, complete shock when this happened, because on Tuesday he seemed to be perfectly fine.
What do we know about his bookings?
His bookings?
In the future. What did he have looking at him down the road? What did Michael Jackson have to face him if he had survived this medical situation? If he had gotten through last night, what would he be looking at in the weeks ahead?
Well, 50 shows he was going to be doing in London, and they were going to be starting July the 13th. So he was going to be very, very busy, and it was going to entail a lot of physical, you know, performance, you know, on stage, doing all of his numbers. He said the show was very much a retrospective. So we were going to be seeing that Michael, and, you know, that's what I say that has contributed even more so to just the death of someone, is the sadness that, you know, in some way Michael Jackson, the person that, you know, people are going out and, you know, he's on iTunes, 9 out of the top 10 albums right now are Michael Jackson's albums. The only other person in there, or group in there, is the Black Eyed Peas. So this is the person that everybody wanted to see. And there's a double sadness, Chris, I think, in the fact that, you know, we didn't get to see him redeem himself. You know, we didn't get to see him make this huge comeback that what everybody was expecting from those who have been there at the tour rehearsals.
What do we know about his attempt to get into shape? I mean, you talked about his stylist saying he's dancing along with 20-year-olds as if he were a 20-year-old still, and he's 50 years old. What do we know? Lou Farina, the guy was working out with him, right? He was really, I mean, yet I also hear he was down to about 110 or so pounds.
Yeah, we heard that he had been working out with him. There was a couple of pictures that came out the other day from a photo shoot, and I have to say, just from looking at the pictures, and, you know, who knows if they were enhanced or not. I don't think that they were, because they've come out, you know, very shortly after his death. But he looked to be in very good shape to me, just from these recent photos and from the high hairstylist, again, who was there every single day at the rehearsals that Michael was there. He said he appeared to be in great shape, that, you know, this came as a complete shock to him. He thought he was in extremely good condition. So the reports are just very conflicting.
Yeah, it's pretty inside reporting, Nancy. Hold on there. Thank you for this so much. Let me go to Ed Gordon. Ed, your thoughts about this, putting it together as someone you've interviewed on several occasions.
I think what Nancy said was interesting in the sense of, and I mentioned this earlier with you, Chris, there is a dichotomy of Michael Jackson. It's been ongoing since his adult career, and that is you hear one story and then you hear a totally contradictory story on how he's doing, what he's feeling, and the mystery continues in his death. One of the interesting points is he was such a mix of, quote, black and white, good and evil, as some will suggest. We saw the sense of, I think, wonderment from the White House press corps on yesterday, when the White House had real confusion as to whether to announce an official statement about the death of Michael Jackson. And just how that played itself out shows how tragic a figure this man was.
What do you think It's so new in our life. I always try to remind myself that in this culture of ours, our American culture, we've had the African-American experience on this continent, 250 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow in many parts of the country, followed by 50 years of what? And where does Michael Jackson fit in that history that's continuing and perhaps improving over the years?
Well, I think Michael Jackson is a personification of the movement of the African-American spirit. I mean, he was well loved by all as a little tyke, but immensely loved by Black America as the leader of the Jackson Five. And then as he went into adulthood, again, white America embraced him, but not in the same way that Black America saw him as a truly beloved figure. And it wasn't until the transformative album of Thriller that all of the world embraced this figure. And then there was this kind of tossing of the coin, looking at the other side, when Michael seemed to, at least outwardly, want to get away from being African American, the straightening of the hair, the reducing of the features, the lightening of the skin. And so there was always, for those of us in the Black community, a sense of love for this man, but the wonderment of what is really going on inside of you internally. But again, as I mentioned before, Chris, we've got to make sure that we understand here was a flawed human being without question, but a genius musically nonetheless.
You know, watching it from outside, it seems like the African-American community, and that's a big word for a big community, seems to embrace people who've been sort of prodigal sons in this way. I mean, you think of O.J., who spent his life in the white world, basically, and yet when he got into big trouble, and I think deservedly so by getting into it, the African-American community embraced him and took him home.
Well, there's a sense of embracing when you see someone under siege by what is seen by white America to a great degree not being able to give the benefit of the doubt that they may give to a white person in the headlines. But let's not mix the message with the time and place of history. Much of Black America still held O.J. To task and didn't necessarily say they saw him as innocent, but they saw him as yet another black man being beaten up by a system that wasn't always fair.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks, guys. Again, I'll talk to you again, Ed. Thanks for joining us again and sticking with us tonight. Nancy O'Dell, it's great working with you even under tragic circumstances. Great to have your reporting.